today's talk is on the subject that comes up with non-Christians. And they really think they have a great argument. They really think they have a great excuse to not pay attention to God because they've got this question: if He's all-powerful and all-loving, then how can He allow so much suffering and pain on earth? Therefore, either He's not all-powerful, or He's not all-loving, or He just doesn't exist. And they're very smug about that. They think, we got you, we have this, we got you. And it's really a dumb argument. And that's kind of what today is about, is that why is that a really stupid argument? So we're just hopefully going to beat it to death, and then we're going to leave it behind, because this is specifically, what do we do when we have non-Christians who really think they've got the answer? My stepfather was like this. That's what, eventually he did accept Christ, but whenever this topic would come up, he would whip this out. That and, well, how come there are so many religions? It depends on where you were born, and so that was his argument. But this is his big one. Look at all the suffering. Look at all the bad things that happen. How can a just, loving God permit all of this? Either He's not just, He's not loving, or He's not all-powerful, or He just doesn't exist. All right? Anybody ever see that TV show, Supernatural?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Was it two guys?
Yeah, Sam and Dean's been on. It's like the longest running TV show ever, okay? One of the things, in that particular TV show, they present God as a guy named Chuck, okay? And they present him as very careless. He created the universe, and then he just goes off on vacation and says, you guys fend for yourselves, I don't meddle. And it's like, it seems to be designed to get people to not take God seriously. Really, when you think about what they're saying here. And next I have an excerpt just to give you an idea as to what this is just, and again, this is a discussion between two angels talking about how irresponsible God is.
Even if we found Joshua's bat phone, God's not going to care. You want to know how I know?
How?
You ever wonder why a vaunted apprentice became a lowly button pusher?
Well, I heard that Joshua offered you more responsibility and you just walked away.
I believed in heaven. Our mission, I believed Castiel. But then I got to Earth and I saw that it wasn't the paradise God promised. There was so much hate, so much suffering. So I asked Joshua. These were God's creations. His perfect people. Why wasn't He helping them? And do you know what he said?
No.
God doesn't meddle. He doesn't meddle? Well, I do. So I do.
And here I thought you just performed miracles for the money.
Well, you haven't been paying attention then. I do them for me. I don't need heaven, and I don't need God. And I'm happy, Castiel.
Really? Because that sounds lonely.
We're all lonely. Because we're all alone. From ant to lion to human to angel. Every last one of us.
He does meddle. But God reached out and He brought me back to life.
So He saves one angel and watches millions of people die screaming every day. What does that say about Him?
You get the idea.
Huge seed of doubt that was presented.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. That's what it's designed to do. You can turn the lights back on now. It's about doubt. It's about, because typical non-Christian has lived their lives oblivious to God, and if we are oblivious to Him, even though He's doing things, we don't notice it. Okay, you're not going to feel it. You don't until you enter a relationship with Him. It seems like He's not there, and so they play on that concept that since you don't see God doing anything, He's not visible, and all you see are the bad things, then therefore He's nowhere to be found. And how can, since he created the world, we see all this evidence, but then He just seems to have walked off and left us because look at people, millions of people dying screaming every day. All right? So that's the justification for ignoring him. And he's not a good God. How can an all-powerful, truly loving God stand by and allow so much suffering for the people that he supposedly loves? That is the challenge that they're giving God. Now this is an old argument. This is not new at all. It's been around a long time, but it's getting a lot of play in television right now, movies as well.
Albert Einstein once said, "Dostoevsky gives me more than any scientist." In this video, we will discuss Dostoevsky's masterpiece, The Brothers Karamazov, and also learn why Einstein and millions of others have turned to Dostoevsky for both instruction and entertainment. On the surface, The Brothers Karamazov is a story about a Russian family. Fyodor is the dissolute father, Dmitri is the passionate and eldest son of Fyodor, Ivan is the intellectual atheist and Fyodor's second son, Alyosha is the pious novice and the youngest legitimate son, and Smerdyakov is the immoral and illegitimate son. Although the plot is thrilling and entertaining in itself, Dostoevsky's primary goal in writing the novel is to explore complex moral and philosophical themes. Specifically, he addresses the existence of God and evil. Book 5 is the heart of the novel, in which Dostoevsky presents the two opposing philosophical arguments of faith and doubt concerning God. Ivan, who represents the skeptic, argues that the existence of God is irrelevant. It's not that I do not accept God, it's the world erected by him I don't and cannot accept. Ivan rejects the world because there is innocent suffering and evil in it. Theologians and philosophers have provided several justifications for the existence of evil, but Ivan is not convinced by them. He first considers the explanation that evil is necessary to understand what is good. In other words, we would not be able to understand what is good unless there was evil. Ivan claims that the understanding of good and evil costs too much. The whole world of knowledge is not worth the suffering of one child.
So that's the thing. If evil is here as a teaching tool so that you'll understand what is good, then that's not a fair deal. Because if even one innocent child has to suffer, then that's not a good deal. That education simply costs too much. Now, what's underlying that argument is this. If I were God, I would do a better job. If I were God, I would teach people a different way. I wouldn't allow the suffering of one innocent child. So if I can be a better God, then there can't be an all-powerful God, because I could even do a better job than that. So that's inherent in this particular argument. But he goes on.
Ivan also asserts that the Christian concepts of heaven and eternal harmony are not adequate justifications for innocent suffering. Imagine that you are creating a fabric of human destiny with the object of making men happy in the end, giving them peace and rest at last, but that it was essential and inevitable to torture to death only one tiny creature, and to found that edifice on its unavenged tears. Would you consent to be the architect on those conditions?
Same idea. If you ultimately, you're making humanity, and your goal is to put them in a blissful, happy state forever and ever. But in order to do that, in order to create this, you have to torture to death one innocent child and leave that child unavenged. Would you be willing to do that? Is it worth it? And he's saying, no, it's not worth it, because in my universe, that wouldn't happen. And then he gives this very famous illustration.
We will conclude this video with one of Ivan's most scathing criticisms of the Christian God. There was a little girl of 5 who was hated by her father and mother. This poor child of 5 was subjected to every possible torture by those cultivated parents. They beat her, thrashed her, kicked her for no reason till her body was one bruise. Then they went to greater refinements of cruelty. Shut her up all night in the cold and frost in a privy, and because she didn't ask to be taken up at night, as though a child of 5 sleeping its angelic sound sleep could be trained to wake and ask, they smeared her face and filled her mouth with excrement. And it was her mother did this. And that mother could sleep hearing the poor child's groans. Can you understand why a little creature, who can't even understand what's done to her, should beat her little aching heart with her tiny fist in the dark and the cold, and weep her meek, unresentful tears to dear, kind God to protect her? Do you understand that, friend and brother, you pious and humble novice? Do you understand why this infamy must be and is permitted?
This innocent child, 5 years old, hasn't done anything wrong, and her parents are torturing her in this abysmal way. And God is just allowing this to happen, and he's not doing anything about it. So how in the world, how could this infamy be tolerated? So this God, you say, this all-powerful, having the ability to help, stands by and does nothing. How can he be a just, loving, and good God? Now, one response that I think that we automatically have is that, well, this is a hypothetical case. How often does that sort of thing really happen? Not very often, but it does happen. I actually had a case that was very similar to that. So he's saying there is no justification, no good reason for man to be allowed to suffer. Okay? There's no way. If God, since God allows these terrible things to happen, there is no way there can be a good reason for it. There can be no justification. If I were God, I would create people who would all go to heaven, and not one person would experience suffering. Everybody would live happily ever after, because I am more moral than God. And that's why I reject God, because I excel. I am better than God. And that's an example of outrageous pride, for one thing. But they really hold on to this. Okay, you see a lot of this on college campuses. Now again, I had a real life example, like that little girl. I had a case that was very, very similar to that. It was a little boy, and this is just the family history. I've changed the names here, but I think everybody's dead now anyway, so it probably doesn't matter. But anyway, we have Griselda. She's a woman from Munich, Germany. She lost her whole family in World War II, so she has nobody left in Germany. And she met and married an American GI named Ben. And after the war, they moved to the United States from Germany. They moved to New York. Okay? Now, Ben had an affair with Hachi, who was a Seminole Indian woman from Florida, and he left Griselda after 3 years of marriage. All right, so he goes and he's gone, and she gets left in New York all by herself. Okay, so she doesn't know anybody except the few people that they've met. She has no relatives here, and she's stranded because he did that to her, which was a bad thing. After 8 months, Ben leaves Hachi and returns to his wife Griselda. After weeks of begging, she accepts him back. So he comes back, all right? So while he's back, sorry about that, we cool. Okay. Well, and after he comes back, she gets pregnant with their son, whom they named Carl. And Carl was my patient, actually, okay? And so they have Carl. Now, after that Carl turned 4, Ben left Griselda again and went back to Hachi in Florida. So he did it again, only this time he leaves her with his child. So Griselda's left to raise Carl by herself. Single mom, German immigrant after World War II. Okay, so things are going to be kind of rough for her here. And she hates her ex-husband very much. She hates Carl, and she hates his son, Ben. And so she's stuck with a child who reminds her of the husband that dumped her twice. She's not happy about this. And it comes out in her treatment of Carl. And when he was, from the time he was a little boy, all the way up until he was around 11, 12 years old, she would lock him in the closet every day. She would lock him in the closet for hours and hours. And if he couldn't hold himself, so if he had to urinate or defecate, and if he did it on himself, she'd rub his face in it and then beat him with an electric cord. And she did that for 10, 11 years. Okay? Now, he ended up with a very serious mental health problem, as you might imagine. And when he asked his mother when he got older why she treated him so much worse than other mommies treated their children, what she did, she would simply point out that it was all your father's fault. This is what your father did. And so she would always recite all the bad things that her dad did, and this is why he gets treated so bad, because of that. So ultimately her goal was to get her son to hate his father as much as she hated him. And so she tortured the kid in order to achieve that. So the innocent, do suffer at the hands of the wicked. That does happen. Innocent people do suffer. And this is kind of an extreme example. This is not common. It doesn't happen all the time, every day, everywhere, but it does happen. Okay? Okay, here's the rest of the story.
In response to Ivan, Alyosha, who represents the man of faith, does not try to refute his brother by using logical arguments. Instead, he performs a profound act of love. He kisses Ivan. This act is symbolic. It means that words are incapable of explaining the world and God. It is only through our intuitions and emotions, specifically through love, that we can understand and accept God and the world.
That kind of, what? Dostoevsky was trying to proselytize. He was trying to, he was trying to get people to get serious about God. He did the opposite. In this example, he just gave atheists ammunition. You know, he did this profound, instead of explaining on a logical level to his brother, instead of trying to explain why the innocent suffer, he kisses him, and that's considered a profound act of love. That doesn't explain nothing. That explains absolutely nothing. You can only understand God through emotion. No, that is the most outrageous, absurd thing. It is that is totally anti-biblical. Okay? God says, come, let us reason together, not let's feel together. Okay? It's nonsense. You know, it comes, basically, it presents Christians as not having any logical response to the problem of the innocent suffering. They're just like, oh, let's just love is the answer no matter what. Just give me a kiss, I'll give you a kiss, and that'll solve your problems. No, that is not a good response at all. There is a logical response, and kissing ain't it. Okay? So God is being put on trial here. Here's that first woman from Supernatural said, God watches millions of people die screaming every day because he doesn't meddle. He doesn't care. He just made the universe and walked off, and he made a new universe, and he just left us alone. He just abandoned us. So if he's all-powerful and he chooses not to rescue us from pain and death, then he cannot logically love us. Because he doesn't rescue every person from harm, God is a smug, careless, indifferent father, unworthy of adoration, praise, affection, or worship. In other words, I am justified in not taking your Jesus seriously. I am justified in ignoring the God of your Bible, okay? Because I could do a better job, and he is irresponsible. He is a unresponsible father. Now, there are a few problems. If life on earth is all there is, then pain and annihilation is truly the worst tragedy that can befall a person. I mean, if this is all there is, if God just made us for a few moments on earth, and then we get tortured and beaten and treated shamefully, and then we die and it's over, well then yeah, you got a point. It is pretty bad. That is kind of bad when you put it that way. You know, because what the reason is because the suffering and death were for nothing, except maybe God's entertainment. So if somebody is on earth and they suffer horribly and then die, and that's it for them, that's all she wrote, that's pretty sad. That is pretty sad. I mean, if God was watching and did nothing, then that is kind of bad. I mean, that does sound terrible. And from the atheist perspective, that's what they're observing, and that's why they're calling God bad. You know, God's just watching all this horrible stuff go on. This is the only life that entity is going to have. They suffer and die, didn't do anything wrong, and God's just watching. That makes them sound pretty bad. However, that argument loses its potency when you factor in that death isn't the end. It's not the end by a long shot. But if you have the perception that it's the end, then that's a problem. Now, the thing is with atheists is that it's very difficult to hold the position that death is the end now, because we have all these, the near-death experience phenomenon is becoming very pervasive, and most people now are starting to get it. It's very difficult to find somebody who's going to say, oh, there's no evidence of life after death, because even in the medical journals, since the AWARE study was published in 2014, where they demonstrated, multiple near-death experiences and even veridical perception, where in the trial they had people who were clinically dead, who were brain dead, known to be brain dead, and yet they were able to describe things that were remote from their bodies that only they could have known about if they had come out of their bodies and seen it. And so you have this, plus you have tens of thousands of near-death stories that people are putting on YouTube and everything now. And so, I mean, even atheists are having to come to grips with the idea that this can't be it, because consciousness does continue on after the body dies. The evidence has never been stronger. And so this really kills their argument. Because in order for their argument to be visceral, in order for them to generate anger at God, you have to start with the concept that life on earth is all there is. And it turns out it's not. Okay? Think about it this way. If represents eternity, and this little dot is your life on earth, then whatever you go through during this dot, once that's over, this is a bigger deal. Okay? And so what was that guy's name from the Victor, or whatever his name was, the atheist from that example was, he said, well, if one little kid suffers, it's not worth all that eternity. This right here can never make up for this. And I'm going, what kind of logic are you using? Are you nuts? What do you mean? What are you talking about? So if I suffer for a millisecond, does that then make the rest of my life stupid or bad? Or this is dumb logic. Those are words. You're using those words to make yourself seem like you're more spiritual, more holy than God. But it's dumb. That's a dumb argument that, if one person suffers a little bit here, then this is meaningless. That's horrible. That never should have happened. Who do you think you are? Exactly. Who do you think you are to make that statement? All right. Brevity. That's our life on earth. It's brief, okay? It's very brief. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Okay, that's the premise of Christianity, that this is not all there is. So no matter how much we suffer here, there is a big thing that's following this that lasts a whole lot longer than life on earth. Not only, in the Christian perspective, not only do we have this eternal presence, this eternal consciousness, but he created us to be his children, that he's really bringing us in as his personal family. So it's not just that we go somewhere and he looks at us in a fishbowl and says, are you guys happy? I just want to see y'all having fun. He interacts with us as his children, as his very offspring. He's lifting us to a position that we can't even imagine. Okay, so this eternity that follows our brief experience on earth is incredible. It's more than we can imagine, and it lasts forever. He didn't make us for eternal life on earth. All right, so that's something that's very important to consider. Earth is a cosmic factory where God is building a family for himself to be with him, cherished, honored, and loved forever. So, whatever happened here, whatever harm befell us, whether we were innocent or not, it's beside the point. What we have coming after it overwhelms that several orders of magnitude over and over again. Now, in a factory, when you make a part, when you pour some iron in a mold and then you take that piece of steel or iron out of the mold, is it ready to go right there? Not usually. It's got a lot of rough edges on it. It has to be bent into shape. It requires some grinding and some manipulating before you get your final product. Well, that's kind of what earth is for us. All right? We get born here, but we have some things to learn. And so very often suffering plays a very big role in altering our character and helping God to create us into who he wants us to be. Okay? God often uses pain to grind our ragged edges and bend us to suit for our divine purposes. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. All right. How can a loving God allow innocent children to die young? By not helping them, isn't God complicit in their murder? This is one of the things that they were trying to say. It's like, these poor innocent children, he could have did something and he didn't. That's not fair. God is therefore guilty of murder, and by his own standards, he is immoral. Okay. Arguments against God being immoral for allowing the death of the innocent. There's several of them. Okay. A, if you die as a child and cross into heaven much earlier, humans were never designed to live eternally on earth as animal beings. Okay, so if you die as a kid, then where do you go after that? Boom. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, life on earth is brief, death is quick, and you go on. The other thing, though, is that God created those children. God created those children. So if they die, whenever they die, he can decide that because he made them. Now, if you're just a babysitter and something bad happens to the kids, then your irresponsibility is kind of immoral, okay? You were supposed to be watching them kids. They're not yours. They were your responsibility, and you let something bad happen to them. Now, in that case, you can say, okay, you did something bad. That was irresponsible and kind of immoral. You should have been watching those children. You shouldn't let them, drink Drano and run in the street if you're supposed to be the babysitter. And that argument that God stood by and let bad things happen assumes that he's just a cosmic babysitter. He's not. He's the cosmic parent. He's the cosmic creator. And if you think of it that way, you realize, wait a minute, does he not have the right to take us out whenever he wants? Isn't that, how can you call that immoral when he made us in the first place? That child wouldn't have anything if it weren't for God. That child wouldn't exist. So if God made it out of nothing, then does he not have the right to take it home when he chooses? Now imagine, here's an example. Imagine Joe here. He's on a deserted island. He's got nothing to eat but papaya and coconuts. He's stranded there, just papaya and coconuts every day, papaya and coconuts. And so he's very clever, and he managed to experiment with his belly button lint boogers and toenail clippings. And eventually he turns this waste material into living chickens, okay? He's a very good biochemist. So the chickens eat bugs, coconuts, and the papaya, and they make baby chickens, and soon Joe is having eggs for breakfast and fried chicken for dinner every night, okay? So life is a lot better because he made them chickens out of his boogers and belly button folds and fingernails, okay? So there you go, all right? So then one day, a ship comes by belonging to PETA, all right? And they come by and they land at the island and they find Joe, and Joe's so happy, I'm finally rescued. He says, thank you for saving me. Have some lunch with me. We're having fried chicken, all right? And the PETA lady says, no, all animals matter, Joe. You are immoral. You have no right to kill and eat these chickens. We're going to leave this island, and you're not welcome on our ship because you're a murderer eating those poor defenseless chickens. How dare you? All right? And Joe's like, but I made the dang chickens out of me. They're made out of belly button lint, boogers, and toenail clippings. I made them. They wouldn't be alive if it weren't for my stuff. Okay? So the question is, from an emotional perspective, which one would anybody with half a brain side with? I mean, this lady comes along and yells at him, and the thing is, the chickens are made out of himself. He engineered them. They wouldn't exist if he hadn't made them out of himself. And the same way, that kind of applies to God. What are we made out of? Okay, yeah, the dirt and everything, but what makes us special? Why do we have a soul? That nefesh, that came out of God's breath. He breathed that into us. That's himself. God breathed part of himself into us. That's why we're eternal. That's why we can't die. Because God created us out of himself, and it can't die. It can't, he can't kill us. He won't kill us, all right? And so there's the deal. And so, if you create something that didn't exist before out of yourself, and for somebody to come around and say, it's immoral, you don't have the right to do with it what you want, that's stupid. It's yours. You can do what you want with it. The argument that God is a murderer of innocent loses its potency when you factor in the fact that he made every last one of us. He brought us in, and he has a right to take us out when he wants. Okay? All right. Friedrich Nietzsche says, the only excuse for God is that he doesn't exist. Because if he does exist, how do you explain all this horrible stuff that's going on earth? Okay, again, he goes along with those guys. Okay?
One day, I just started thinking, God, are you real? Why would you not show yourself to me if you're real? And I'd say, God, you know what? You know why I don't believe you're real? I'm going to tell you why. Because I see evil people who don't care about anybody, and they have billions of dollars. Money they can never touch, never spend, they just watch it stockpile. There's kids not eating tonight. Where are you? How do I believe in you? You're the all-knowing, all-loving, and all-caring. Well, this is what I see, evil people who are prospering, and I see young innocent children who are going to bed hungry. Some will die of starvation. And I'm wondering where you are. If you are real, and please show yourself to me. I want to know.
So, you see, this issue is not something that's obscure and only on college campuses. This is a big reason why a lot of people don't consider Christianity. And you start talking about the Lord, and they think that, well, I don't have to listen to what you say, blah, 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 because this is what they're thinking. Because look at, we have, how can God be just? He allows evil people to amass fortunes, and innocent people are suffering and hungry, and God is okay with this disparity. You look at all around, it's like there are so many things, looking around at other people suffering and going, God, where are you? The innocent people are suffering horribly. People are being executed, losing their kids, starving to death, in accidents, having horrible diseases. Look at all the innocent people suffering while evil people never get punished. God is unjust and unfair. Now, let's just put that under the microscope, is his outrage. What is this outrage all about? Why is he so upset about this? Let's look at it in detail. People are upset because this is what they perceive, and it's not terribly right. Okay, this down here, this is how much you deserve to suffer. How bad are you, and how much do you deserve it? So people at 0 are like little children, or people with cognitive disorders and so forth, who don't know any better, and they don't deserve any suffering. They haven't done anything wrong, so they're at 0. And then over here at 100, you got people who they've just harmed all kinds of people. They're just they just take and steal and harm other people, so they deserve to suffer 100. And what we see is people over here at the 0, not deserving anything. Some of them are suffering 100. And yet people over here who deserve 100 are suffering 0. And so it looks like it's arbitrary. It looks like pain and suffering and good fortune and not good fortune. It looks arbitrary. So where is God? He has the power to make the world just, and yet he allows innocent people to suffer and not innocent people to get by and be okay and be cool. So and that's the outrage. That's the outrage that he was talking about. Now, what would we like to see? How would we feel better about God? What would we like to see? Well, it would look something like this. If somebody deserved to suffer 0, they'd suffer 0. Okay? What if they deserve to suffer 10? Well, if God wants to be cool and better, then let's make them suffer 5. Okay? So they don't get what they really deserve, but, they're not getting more than they deserve. And just follow this up. And so you get something like this. And so, by this, you don't get anybody suffering more than what they deserve. And so people, that's what I like to see. Yeah, I like that. I want to see that. But then after they look at it for a while and go, wait a minute, I don't like that so much. There's something wrong with that. What's wrong with it? Well, look at this over here. You got this guy who deserves 100 who's sitting at 0. Be just about it. He hurt folks, and they need some justice. So, let's modify that. Let's look at that. Let's do this. There you go. Let's erase that. So now, if you deserve 100, you're going to get at least the 70 or 80, okay? And if you don't deserve anything, you get nothing. And so you get this little strip right here so that people get about what they deserve. All right? People get about what they deserve. And that would be a fair and just God. This is what they think they want to see. And if the world would be like this, then they'd be ready to accept Christ. Then, I'll go along with Jesus now because this would be fair. All right? Because the thing is that the innocent, in reality, when you really take a look at the God that exists, take a look at what the Bible has to say about the holiness of the God that exists, what you recognize is the only innocents are like newborns and those with developmental disabilities. Most of us deserve 100% banishment from God. Okay, that's the reality. And see, that's that thing where you feel you're so innocent, you're not. You're not. You do not. Yeah. And that's the thing is, if God really were to do that, you wouldn't like it. You would not like it. Yeah. You take a look at the smallest particle of matter that we are aware of would be the quark. Quarks make up like protons and neutrons. So 2 up quarks and a down quark make a proton and all that. So quarks are the smallest unit of matter. And when it comes to how holy each individual is, we've got about 1 quark of holiness, and the rest of our body is not suitable. I mean, that's the thing is that we cannot earn our way to God. Our good deeds are as filthy rags. I mean, the Bible's very clear about that. And so that's what they're not accepting. That's what you're not getting, is that all of us deserve 100% punishment. Okay? Our indignation with the system is based on the faulty premise that man is basically good and deserving of heaven. Okay?
Right.
All right. So atheists claim if God permits even one innocent child to suffer, then no heavenly experience can make up for the unjust suffering on earth. Oh, if one child suffers. Really? Is that really a rational assertion? It is absurd. You know, if you live for 100 years and you suffer, let's say heaven is only 10,000 years. 100 years of this versus this much complete bliss. Does that make sense? And eternity is about 1 billion times more than this. Okay, so it's like, what math did you take? That, oh no, if you have 1 ounce of suffering here, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That doesn't count because you had this. What is wrong with you? Okay, that's stupid. That's stupid. What was God's purpose in creating man? Why did he make us in the first place? Same reason we have children. Okay? He wanted to share. He wanted to expand his love. He wanted to share what he has with someone else and experience a love relationship. That's what we want from our children. And the other thing that's really cool is that if you have something that you love, if you have a job that you like, a vocation, and you bring your children in and they do it with you, that's even better. Okay? It's cool if they get involved with us like that. And so that's kind of something that we like. We want to have affectionate interactions with our children and share our greatest joys with them. Okay? That's what he wants with us. So, God's goal is not to create a fishbowl filled with happy, peaceful, rested fish. And see, that kind of, back to Dostoevsky's situation, he was like, oh, if God wanted to just make us all happy, he should have just snapped his fingers and made it. Why does somebody have to suffer? He wanted to give birth to beings like himself that he will love and treat as adult sons and daughters for eternity. All right? All right, so in his fishbowl model, this is where God just creates us, and his whole goal is, I just want to see my fish getting along and being happy all the time. It's like, I want zoo creatures. That's not what God wants. He doesn't just want to watch us be happy all the time. In the Muslim view of heaven, that's kind of what you have. If you take a look at what the Quran has to say about heaven, you go there and you get to eat a bunch of food and you get waited on by a bunch of virgins, okay, and there you go. And that's like that's heaven. You have a heaven that's exactly how some man would make up, okay? That is not the biblical picture of heaven at all. Okay? Okay, this one here, I'm going to explain this one because some of you have seen this one before. Okay, with Yvonne Sneeden, she kind of took too much of her heart medicine and stopped her heart. Okay, she had an arrhythmia, and antiarrhythmic drugs can be very serious. Okay, you don't want to take too much of that because it can stop your heart, which is what happened to her. And in the Bible study, we've seen her a few times, but she is able to even though English isn't her first language, French is her first language, but she does a very good job of using words to explain what her near-death experience was like, what her experience with Christ was like. And I just want to play this because I think she does a very good job of explaining what will it mean for us to be one with the Lord. Okay, she does a very good job of describing that. Okay.
Yvonne, I will give you my strength. I will give you my energy of life. And when Jesus said that, I receive an instant feeling of a sparkling, effervescent, powerful, rejuvenating, sparkling liquid energy that filled my entire being until my ankles. And it stopped at my ankles. I'll never know why. I don't have the answer why. I've tried to find it for years and ask questions around me, but it never happened. And then at that time, Jesus said to me, after that feeling, Yvonne, I love my people. I love humanity. I love all creation. I love everyone. And this was not the Jesus of, condemning and making you feel guilty if you make a mistake. This was the all loving. It was pure love. Pure, higher level of love and kindness. Telling me, Yvonne, I love every one of those beings. I love everyone. I love my babies. And when he said that, and I was thinking in my mind, you're Jesus. I mean, you came on earth to teach love, and it's kind of normal that you love everyone. And so he said to me, I'll show you how I love. I will show you how I love. And when he said that, he took my heart, my being, my essence, who Yvonne is, all together, and he blended it with his heart, his essence, his being, and we became one. Complete, perfect oneness. Just like Jesus said to God, Father, may you and I be, may they be one, like you and I are one. I experienced that oneness with Christ, with love itself, with pure love. In that oneness and one love, I felt the trillions of love and compassion for humanity, for creation, for nature, for all of us and beyond. I felt trillions of bursts of compassion and of gentleness and beyond forgiveness. In that light, love itself was telling me, you are loved, there is no wrong with you. And you know, when you come from a journey like Earth, when you separated, I understood also, coming back from that experience of, I cannot share the moment of that oneness here in words because it's 1,000 times more powerful and more complex than those very limiting words.
You get the idea. It's once you've, that God like took her and says, and he did this. And she got a chance to see the universe from his perspective. I mean, Jesus says that he's going to do that in the book of John, but it's hard to imagine. What are you talking about? And she gives us this. He means that literally, that like we have a discrete self where you say, I am me and you are you, and we're completely separate. And then there's a corporate self where we can, where Jesus actually comes and says, no, I want to be one with you. And when imagine God says, I want to be one with you, it doesn't seem right. You know, we're not worthy for one thing, but also he's God. He's the one that made the universe. Last week I was going through some YouTube things and I came across a video of scanning electron micrographs of very small insects. And it had them in color and everything. And I remember just looking and going, the complexity and even the beauty, and some of those things are like total monsters, and I'm going, that is awesome. It's like the people in Hollywood who make space aliens, they've got nothing on God. I mean, he made them already. They're right here, okay? And I look at the detail in a fly, something that we swat, and you look at it up close and you go, look at the complexity of this thing. And you see, the Lord spent time making all of these creatures. He knows every hair on a fly's leg, okay? I mean, he has that level of greatness, and he's willing to share that with me, with us as individuals, because one thing that people tell you is that when you're with him, it's totally one-on-one. Even though he's doing it to everybody else, when you're there, it's as though you're the only one in the entire universe. It's just you and him. It's just you and him. And you know he knows everything about you, every thought you ever had, every plan of your heart, everything you've ever done. He's your best friend, and he's always been there. And then he's willing to do this with us. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. So for these guys to say, oh, you know, it's not worth it. If you suffer a little bit here, none of that's worth it. And I'm going, what do you don't even know. You don't even know what's in store for us. Do you see the arrogance of that statement? Okay? All right. So Jesus said, John 17:20, I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me because of their testimony. My prayer for all of them is that they will be one, just as you and I are one, Father. That just as you are in me and I am in you, so they will be in us. And the world believed that you sent me. And so, so it's like this blending thing, that's a biblical concept, all right? Yeah. Suffering and pain are a necessary byproduct of allowing free will. And so, their argument is there can be no good excuse for allowing an innocent child to suffer. There is no excuse for that. Absolutely none. Okay? Well, in order for free will to exist, you have to be able to choose wrong. Okay? You have to, all right? Now, the options available, God, he could have created us with no free will, 100% obedient, robotic, biological entities, or give us free will. We know what happened when he gave us free will. What if he hadn't? What if he just made us little robots? Okay, so when faced with these options, should I lie or tell the truth? Should I be kind or sarcastic? Should I shoot or walk away? Should I redirect my thoughts or give somebody the finger? Okay, when you're faced with these here options, no free will means I'll never make a wrong choice. Never make a wrong choice. But the problem with that, the problem with creating robots, is that every act of kindness, every expression of affection from all of your friends and family have been forced and therefore are fake. If you don't have any choice but to say please and thank you, then that means nothing. If every act of affection and self-sacrifice is forced, if you have no free will, then it's pointless. Who wants to watch that?
You also get undeserved favor, but without real love.
Yeah, there'd be no real love. There would be no real love. Absolutely. Okay? If you could create a robot, then they'd spend the entire day praising God. They'd never commit a sin, never hurt anybody emotionally or physically, kind to the animals and environment. You know, they do everything right, but they're programmed. They're programmed to do everything right. Who would want to watch them? Okay? It's like winding up a toy and watching it walk across the floor. What else is it going to do? Okay? It won't actually be an actual child of God. It's more like a science project. It can't grow into anything greater because it's already following a perfect program. It's incapable of actual love because real love is a choice. Real love is a choice. They would be boring for God to watch because they're simply carrying out a program that God wrote. Okay? God did not create suffering just to teach man about goodness. God did not create suffering just so that man would appreciate heaven. Suffering is a logical byproduct of creating sentient beings with a free will. It's a logical byproduct. In order to have, if we're going to have free will, then people have to be able to say no to good, and therefore they can hurt each other. Love and sacrifice for others, hate, greed, and cruelty, there needs to be a choice. If you take away, you can be selfless or selfish. All right? If you take away those options of hate, greed, and cruelty, if you exclude those options, then it's not free will. You're back to a biological robot. So why do people treat people so badly, and why are unjust things happen? Because God wants man to have free will. Without free will, then any good acts, any kindness, any love isn't real. Okay? So we end up with bad things happening because people use their free will for bad. Is there any way that God could give me free will without risking the possibility that I'll use my free will to harm another person? I want you to think about that. Could God have done it another way? Is there a way to give individuals free will and ensure that nobody uses their free will to harm another person? Is it possible?
A billion other worlds.
There you go. That's the right answer. Yes, there is a way. There is a way. It's called the multiverse theory, okay? In which case, the multiverse solution, all right? Now, what does that mean? That means for every one individual, you give them their whole universe just for them. Every other person is fake. Every other person in that universe is just a shell that has no free will, but they're not real people. They're just biological robots that God creates so that one person can have free will and not hurt anybody. Okay? So I would have my own private universe. Nobody's real. None of y'all are real. Pat gets his own universe. Joyce gets her universe. Jill gets her universe. Everybody gets their own private universe, so no matter how bad my behavior is, I can't hurt anybody because they're not real. Okay, so this way God gets to judge me, and I can act out my free will and not hurt another person because there are no other souls in my reality. Okay? In Joyce's universe, she's the only real person with a soul. The Pat that she has is a fake Pat. Okay? She's the only real person. Okay? So whatever she does, she can't hurt anybody that way. Of course, unfortunately, she can't help anybody either because none of the people are real. So all acts of kindness are for entities that don't really exist. But she can't hurt anybody. All right, so that would work. God could have done it that way. In Joyce's universe, she can't actually help anybody because none of her acts of love benefits any actual souls. All right, now you remember the Truman Show? Because that's kind of, in the Truman Show, you had a kid. Anybody remember that? Because it was Jim Carrey. And in the Truman Show, since he was born, he was the star of a TV show. Everybody, his parents, his childhood friends, his teachers, his neighbors, everybody was an actor following a script. He was the only one that didn't know it was a TV show. And so the cameras were on him his whole life. I had a patient one time that thought that he was on the Truman Show. And he came into me because he was tired of being on TV all the time. He was just he's fed up with people watching him take a bath and go to the bathroom and all this stuff. He was proud of having no privacy, and he wanted to find a way for that to stop. He says, why are you talking to me? I'm a psychiatrist. You must understand that something might be wrong. Okay, but yeah, it was called delusional disorder. And his delusion, everything else was normal. He wasn't schizophrenic or anything. Every other aspect of his life was normal, but he believed that cameras were following him his whole life, and everybody was an actor, and he was just tired of being on TV. Okay, and medication actually helped him because it usually doesn't work for delusional disorder, but that was his delusion. Well, in the Truman Show, it's not a delusion. He really is the star of his own TV show, and he's been watched since he was a child. Now, what happens is one day while sailing, he discovers that his world is a television set, and that nothing in his life was actually real. Before he escapes from his TV life, the producer of the show confronts him and offers him a chance to come back into the show. Says, don't leave, come back and be the star, and if you do that, I promise you that no harm will come to you. So if you come back and live your life with all these actors and everything, you can have that, and I promise you, you'll never be harmed. You go out there and you can get harmed. But you stay in here, nothing is real, but you won't be harmed. Okay, so what did he decide?
You can speak. I can hear you. Who are you? I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions. Then who am I? You're the star. Was nothing real? You were real. That's what made you so good to watch. Listen to me, Truman. There's no more truth out there than there is in the world I created for you. Same lies, the same deceit. But in my world, you have nothing to fear. I know you better than you know yourself.
I never had a camera in my head.
afraid. That's why you can't leave. It's okay, Truman. I understand. I have been watching you your whole life. I was watching when you were born. I was watching when you took your first step. I watched you on your first day of school. The episode when you lost your first tooth. You can't leave, Truman.
Please, God.
You belong here
You can do it.
with me. Talk to me. Say something. You're on television. You're live to the whole world.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
Why is everybody so happy that he left, and why did he leave? Now, when people watch the movie, why did they think that was a good thing? Because he realized that everything was fake. Remember he said, was nothing real? Would you want God to do that, to give you your own private universe and fill it with people, and nothing was real? It's all controlled, exactly. Would we really want that? And so when they ask for, well, it's not worth, why would God allow one child to suffer? Well, so you're saying you'd rather, you do want us to have free will, okay, yeah, because nobody says I don't want free will. So yeah, I want free will, but he should have made it so we can't hurt anybody. So your only alternative is a safe, fake world, okay? That's your only alternative then. And if you don't want that, then shut up. You have no argument here, okay? Because in order to have free will, and where people can really love and do good things, we have to be in the same universe, and you have to be able to hurt somebody, okay? That's the only way this is going to work, all right? Okay, would for the sake of safety stay in a world where all the people that supposedly loved you and gave you kindness only did so because they had no choice? Or would you be willing to risk suffering and rejection in the real world where other people could exercise their free will to choose kindness or cruelty? Anybody with half a brain would choose number 2. Okay? All right. How does anybody know exactly how much suffering another person is suffering? You don't. We don't. And so we think, oh, those people over there are suffering so horrible and God is so unfair. Do you really know how much anybody else is suffering? You only know yours. Okay? It's very presumptuous to complain about somebody else's suffering. They do that all the time. They point to somebody they don't even know. Oh, look, poor them, poor Carl. Carl's cool now. Carl's fine. He actually took care of his mother before she died, even though she brutalized him. Okay, I know people who get treated much nicer than that, who are totally more horrible to their parents than Carl was to his. He didn't carry, he had scars, but it doesn't bother him today the way it did when he was 11. Okay? Without being in their shoes, you don't know how much another person is suffering. You see somebody like that and you go, oh, my, it looks so painful and horrible. Well, guess what? Most people who are in this state are not there. They're floating above their body somewhere. Their consciousness very often isn't even in their body. It's sitting there with bed sores and everything. They can be in a coma. They're not there. Talk to people who've been in comas, and very often they'll be aware of people coming to visit them and everything, but they're sitting on the ceiling looking down. They're not even in their bodies. Okay? There is a limit to how much humans can suffer, by the way. There is a limit. Pain comes in from our body through the lateral spinal thalamic tract, goes up into the brain to the thalamus where it's processed, and pain can be pretty bad. If you get a burn injuries, I know from personal experience, got a lot of those babies, okay, 3rd-degree burns, and it's 10 out of 10, by the way. Yeah, burn injuries are 10 out of 10. They're maximum. When you get a burn, it's 10 out of 10, okay? It goes up into your brain, and that's the maximum amount of suffering you can do is 10 out of 10, all right? 10 out of 10, right. Now, what if you've got burn injuries and somebody stabs you after you burn your foot, okay? That's really horrible. That person's suffering a whole lot, right? Way more than the person with just the burn. So they're suffering 20 out of 10, right? It's impossible. You can't suffer 20 out of 10. What happens is when you get stabbed, the pain in your foot goes down by half. And now it's 5 out of 10, 5 out of 10. Okay? I've experienced that. I've tested the theory on several occasions, and it always works. When you get a second pain, the first pain goes down in intensity. Your brain can only accept 10 out of 10 pain. You can't go higher than that. Next time something bad happens to you and you get a wound or something, and they give you the tetanus shot, think to yourself, when they give me the shot, what's going to happen to my other pain? It goes down. That tetanus shot becomes a 5, and your pain becomes a 5. You can only suffer 10 out of 10. So how does somebody suffer more than others? Well, it depends. How long does the pain last? How much of your body surface does it last? And really, how do other people treat you? Because when you're struggling, when you have a traumatic injury, we become very selfish, and we really need people to give us affection during those times. And if they're not there, or if they're not only not giving us affection, they're treating us in a bad way, that intensifies our pain. But the pain itself, you can't go faster, you can't go more than 10 out of 10, okay? Here's the charge. God experiences the suffering, and he just watches us suffer and doesn't do anything. Well, the fact is, he's not a detached observer watching us suffer. God is inside of us. And so when we suffer, he's also suffering. He's suffering with us. So the charge that God is detached up there and completely oblivious is wrong. He suffers with every one of his children, okay? When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. And the king shall answer them and said, when did I say you were sick or thirsty or whatever? He says, if you've done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. He means that literally, okay? And so he is not a bystander to our pain. He experiences that with us. So not only did he die for us, he experiences the pain we have in life. Is God forever cruel because Carl suffered unjustly for 12 years? So is Carl now suffering eternal? Is his whole life one big ball of suffering because of the way his mom treated him for 12 years? No, that's stupid. God can't be forgiven because he allowed Carl to suffer 12 years. That's what they're saying. That's what their charging is. Because Carl, as an innocent child, suffered for 12 years, the rest of his life doesn't matter. God can never make up for putting Carl through that. Since I suffered, I can never truly recover from the injury. So no matter what happens the rest of my life, I suffered that at one time, and now bad. Now think about that. Think about how outrageous that charge is. Some people have a new baby, and they go, all that pain and suffering for this, so not worth it. It's like, even though the pain is over, I suffered that. And since I suffered that, it's now burned on my psyche. And this baby will never be worth the suffering that I had to go through in labor, okay? 36 hours of labor that you put me through was so traumatic to me that I will never forget it. And nothing you can ever do will make up for it, okay? Now, there are women like that. Fortunately, not a lot, but there are. I've met some that do have that attitude. But most normal people, no, that is an abnormal response, okay? Or you have the teenager who goes, life is horrible, I hate you for having me without my permission. That is becoming, you think that's a joke, and that's it. No, it's not. This is a real thing. And kids are saying this now more than they ever have. I mean, I heard this from somebody who back in the 70s said this to the parent. But it's happening now on a regular basis where children are angry with their parents for having them without asking. Okay. So if you saw, a parent who treated their child like this, or a child talking to their parents like that, you go, this is not the response of a well-adjusted individual. This is pathologic. And when the atheist uses this argument, because some innocent person suffered, therefore God can never make up for it. This shows you how this is psychopathology. So if you're trying to reach the masses with this argument, you missed, because this only applies to people with character flaws. Okay? Millions of people who've been victims of unjust suffering, totally forgiven God, and they worship God. It doesn't scar them forever or keep them from experiencing joy later. Okay? I reject God because 20 years ago, God allowed Carl to suffer unjustly at the hands of his mother. This is crazy. You're more angry at God than Carl is. Okay? The fact that you're more angry at God than Carl suggests that you're simply looking for an opportunity to justify your immoral choices. And that's really what it comes down to. Ultimately, that's what it is that they know that if they start getting close to God, the book of John chapter 1, John chapter 1, where it says that the people ran from the light because they feared a painful exposure. I don't want to have to take God seriously because he's going to tell me I'm doing something that I like to do, and he's going to tell me to stop. And I don't want to hear that. And so I like this argument that God is evil and cruel, because I don't want to feel morally obligated to consider the Lord. All right, John 16, Jesus says, when a woman gives birth, she has a hard time. There's no getting around it. But when the baby is born, there is joy in the birth. This new life in the world wipes out memory of the pain. The sadness you have right now is similar to that pain, but the coming joy is also similar. When I see you again, you'll be full of joy, and it will be a joy no one can rob from you. And so God actually addresses this issue. Yeah, there's pain down here. It's a prick. It's a prick compared to the joy that's going to come later. And it is worth it. In spite of what Dostoevsky's atheist character said, it is totally worth it. Okay? So in summary, we cannot know how God does or does not interfere in the affairs of others. Therefore, condemning him as a feckless creator without knowing if your charge is true is foolish, considering that if you're wrong, you're going to pay the ultimate price. There's a limit on how much any one person can experience suffering. God is not detached from our suffering. He suffered when he came to earth, and he died for us, and he suffers when any of his children suffer because he's inside of them. Suffering exists first and foremost because God desired his children to have free will, and free will is required for love to be real. Earthly suffering and pain or death are bad, but for those that choose to pursue God in the next chapter of their human existence, subjective fulfillment and euphoria are eternal and billions of times in magnitude greater than the worst earthly suffering conceivable, even if that suffering were to last 100 years. God's purpose for allowing suffering are not trivial. And that's again, they go with that, well, it's something small, it's some educational thing. No. Suffering exists for big reasons, and these are some of the reasons. And so, for their charge that there can be no good explanation for suffering on earth, that innocent people suffer horribly and there's no way God can justify it. Wait, hold it right there. Okay, yes, way. There's a lot of way. Your argument is absolutely nonsense. And only if you have a character flaw will this make sense. Okay? Normal people who don't have character pathology can see through this very easily. So that's the answer to that question. Okay. So when you come across that, sometimes, when you're trying to share Christ with somebody, this will come up, because then you start to say, why don't you take me seriously? Why don't you want to hear this? And a lot of times this is it. And they've heard it so many times. And on TV shows, if they're watching TV, they will have heard this over and over again. You see it in The Walking Dead. You see it in Supernatural. All the time. How can God? I'm an atheist because look at this. I'm an atheist. I hear this in books. I see it on TV. It's thrown in people's face. And so they might not even have verbalized this is why they don't believe in God. It could be subconscious because it's been thrown at them so many times. And so hopefully when that happens, you have something to say now to add to your repertoire already. Any questions on that?